Yep. I, I hit record and immediately I get a BB boop on my phone. That's great. So, hi, yes, Commanders. This is Nova Seda here. I play Elite Dangerous just like you. I am not charismatic, nor am I a good video editor. So this is going to be fairly practical and to the point. This spreadsheet helps you make passive money with your carrier. As I said, I'm not very good at video editing, and I don't have a lot of time and patience to make this. God damn it! Every 5 seconds is going to happen now. I've literally gotten nothing on my phone all day, and I started recording, and now. So let me mute those. But to the point, there's a million ways to make money in Elite Dangerous, and this is by no means the most effective one. You can go do bounty hunting massacre missions. There's also a billion children outside screaming because they haven't learned volume control yet. So just bear with me here. There's a million other ways to make money in Elite Dangerous. You can go bounty hunt, you can go kill Thargoids, you can go mine, you can go do whatever. So if you're just here to hop in the comments and say, well, why would I do this when I could just don't fucking leave the comment? I already know. And everybody watching this already knows, right? This isn't for you. That's fine. Go somewhere else. But if you're the kind of nerd who wants your carrier to make some passive money on the side, or maybe you're the kind of player who loves the game, but you don't have a lot of time to sit here and make sure you have money on your carrier. And so you want your carrier to be generating some money in the background. As of the time of this recording, and with this current cycle of me doing this little project, I've done it before and stopped out of burnout or whatever, but I'm making about 77 million a day, which is 2 weeks worth of upkeep in a day, right? It's not totally hands off, but there's a lot of set it and forget it time in between. And the way it works is pretty simple. You use your carrier as a storage warehouse for miners, where the price can be a little bit more stable than the actual station market, and a little better. Not always, but that's how you make your profit. Basically, what I do is I sample the prices of the market every day for the highest prices on the market for each mineral. I then throw that into my database on this spreadsheet, which I will show you here. Oh my God, child! I I throw it into this spreadsheet here, and you can see I've collected data for 80 days right now. And then this does some calculations and whatnot, where we can see certain things about our minerals. And not all of this is super important. Price stats can kind of give you like a breakdown, like the highest price I've ever seen, the average high, which is like taking the high price and finding an average in there. It just helps with some of the calculations. All sorts of information here. None of that's super important for anybody who's casually using the sheet. This is like a calculator for if you're basing your purchase of ores on the amount of money that you have to invest. So let's say you want to go into this and you only have 1 billion credits you can spend on minerals. You can use this to recalculate how much cargo you should buy for everything. These are reference sheets that miners and traders can use to see whether it's worth buying from your carrier or not. It's up to you if you want to share that information. But this is the real meat and potatoes of the sheet here. And what it does is it provides you with reasonable prices based on the database, and how much you should buy and sell based on what's most profitable. So for example, platinum sucks, so it's only recommending that I buy 4 tons of platinum. And you can turn these off, though it's not super necessary to turn them off on this sheet now, because there is another sheet, which we'll get into later, that helps you track what you're buying and selling and what you have. So currently I've got 2,500 left in demand, and I've got 10,827 in cargo, which right now, and it's through no fault of the sheet, is not entirely accurate, because since the last update, Frontier has been generating some extra minerals because they've been having problems in managing their own spreadsheets for some reason, even though this high school's diploma security guard can handle a basic fucking spreadsheet. I love you, Frontier, but get your shit together. So yeah. Most of the work is done by me if you're going to be relying on my database, right? The sheet's already built. All you have to do is come in and adjust your prices, which we'll get into how to do that in a second here. But if you don't want to rely on my prices, and I'm not saying entirely that you should, because every once in a while I get burned out and I stop keeping track of it. There was a sheet that had over a year's worth of data, and then I stopped playing for a few months and stopped going in and plugging in these prices. So you should consider keeping your own samples. But if you're lazy and you're willing to risk that, you know, you can link in, and there's instructions over here on how to link into my sheet. And then there's, on this sheet, you can link in your version of this sheet into your log sheet here, which keeps track of what's actually going on in your carrier, to import prices. For example, it helps things like up here, today's price, recommended sell price, recommended buy price is all up here, and that's imported from this sheet. In your case, if you go with the public sheets, you'll be importing this information from your own sheet, and so there's instructions over here on how to link that in. And basically what you do is you take your link from here and you copy paste it here, and then there's a little thing on the sheet that will pop up here that says link established as long as it's connected well. And then you'll have all that stuff imported from your other sheet. You might have to deal with Google Sheets permissions and all that stuff, but more or less it's that simple. You just plug it in, and then all the minerals are designed to pull in from that link that you put in there. So let's get into how this works. When you import from my sheet, you won't have to do this part, but if you don't, every day I go in, drag the date down here, and for the day I go on Inara, and I have certain filters that I use. It's up to you to determine what filters you use, but generally I try to look for a decent demand for a price within 24 hours of the day. Well, within the day, so after midnight, the highest price that's available. Typically it's good to do this consistently at a decent time. I do about 11 a.m. Eastern time, but it can be whenever you want. Really, the bottom line is it's not super important that you get it at a certain time, and it's not going to help you see exactly what the market is doing. But what it's doing is you're collecting data on what the range of instability on a price is, right? And so we can see on the trend charts here that Alexandrite, for example, the highest price you might see in any given day, has this up and down range, right? Which is a range that you can make profit on. Some minerals don't have a good range. Monazite, for example, kind of sucks. So you're not going to make a lot of money. That space between the top and bottom of this graph is where you make your money. Occasionally you get little rare spikes, but they don't really do much for you. So the way this works is the instability of the top price of a mineral. Muscovite is great, for example. Muscovite has a wide variance, and so I make a lot of profit off of that. Painite's pretty good. Platinum kind of sucks, right? But that's what we're working off of here. We're taking this price instability, and we're using our carrier to set stable prices that can make profits in that range, while making it more profitable and more likely for a miner to be able to make profit, which entices them to come to your carrier, and still having room to make it profitable for a trader who can come and offload the shit from your carrier to make money themselves. So it's a win-win-win all the way around, right? And that's kind of what these sheets show. It just shows you like today's best station price is this, today's carrier price is this. If it's in the green, that means, hey, you're going to make money if you sell it to the carrier instead of the station, right? Whereas tritium, I don't really deal on tritium. It's just there as a reference for fuel and like tracking the prices that players are buying it at, which that's a whole fucking thing that people like to debate over. But I've been tracking it pretty well, and people aren't good at choosing prices for tritium. More on that later. Bottom line is you develop a good range of prices to know where you should buy and sell materials at, and you have a reference of the commonality of those prices. So we'll look at Alexandrite. my sheet does some calculations to kind of determine what the averages is for the higher prices. And then you put in your own preferences of percentage, which I'll explain this a little bit in detail here in a second, that create the range that you're willing to buy at, right? And so watch what happens is, so this number here in this cell, the 12, represents, I think it's been a while since I programmed this. It's the percentage between like the lowest price and the highest price, or like 0% and the highest price. So basically 0% should equal the average of the price. 100% should equal, or minus 100% in this case, should equal the lowest price ever seen, right? So 0, we need to set that back to whatever it was so I don't lose it, because I'm actually using this sheet. But as you can tell, like whenever I adjust that, the percentage down below changes, right? And so what's happening there is the sheet is looking at the database and determining what percentages of prices are worse than my price, right? And so 831,108 credits per ton of this material is better than anything stations buy at 60% of the time, which means 41% of the time stations are going to buy a little bit better, right? But 60% of the time I'm better, which means more often than not, my carrier will show up, and if you look on Inara, you'll see the R.C.V. Ronin Star is usually buying minerals higher than most other carriers and most other stations. There's a few carriers that go out a little bit beyond me, and I often wonder how they're doing it. I don't think they're making a terribly huge profit, but there could be something I'm missing too. But my prices aren't just based around me finding the most extreme price one day and selling it. That can happen. My prices are based on my carrier making it profitable for everybody involved. So the miner makes good money 60% of the time, and on the 40% they can go sell to a station, right? But on the days when the stations aren't at good prices, they can come to my carrier and make a little bit more money. So it stabilizes the market, right? Like that's where we make our money. And then the same thing for the trader, right? Like I go for 20%. So 20% of the time, my carrier is lower than station prices because I want stations to be higher than me sometimes so that it's profitable for somebody to come pick this shit up off my carrier and sell it so that I don't have to, right? That's the idea here. Now, I do, when I see an opportunity where a station has a particularly high price and it's within my profit range, I will take it off my carrier and go sell it and make a little bit more money myself. But this also provides opportunities for miners to store the materials that they get here, get some money back for it. And then if they want to make a little bit more money off the stuff that they mine, they can come back to my carrier on a good day, grab it, and sell it at a profit and make some of their money back. And the only money lost is what they paid me to store it, which is down here, estimated carrier profit. So, in effect, it's a warehouse where prices can mature. And it works, right? Like that's the key here, it works. So you can see with most minerals, I try to keep it at about 60%, right? And so those percentages adjust based on, you know, what percentage the price compares to the rest of the database. But 831,000 is better than station prices 59% of the time. 904,000 is worse than station prices 20% of the time. And so the gap between that 60 and that 20, right, is where my profit comes in, right? And that equals to these. Max carrier profit shows you, like, if you were to catch one of those peak profit days, how much money you would make. And so the way you go about adjusting this sheet is you decide what percentage of turnover you want, right? What percentage you want your station to be better or worse than a station's prices. I chose 60-20 out of experience. I think when I started the sheet, I was going for like 70-10 or something like that. The thing to keep in mind here is that the turnover is important, right? The longer it takes to buy and the longer it takes to sell materials, the less profit over time you're going to make, right? But maybe that's fine for you. Maybe you want to go for the bigger prices because you don't want to spend time loading and offloading your carrier, right? Or maybe you're one of those players that has more home time and can get on very reliably and sell shit fast, right? You can get your carrier loaded up in a day and then you can fucking, take your Panther Clipper and sell that stuff off in 5 minutes, right? So maybe you make more money by having a faster turnover, right? So it's up to you, right? That's where the competition, if everybody's using this sheet, that's where players would be competing with each other, right? Is who has the turnover rate where they want it. So obviously the higher you buy, the more turnover, or the faster you fill up, and the lower you sell, the faster you empty, right? And so that might shrink this number. So let's say I made this 10% of the time, right? Let's say I made this lower, right? So let's set it to 0, right? So now I'm losing profit, but that's because 48% overlaps the 59% of 100, right? So maybe I lower this to 0. And you can see with both zeroed out, the profit equals 0 because they both land on that same average number. But if we lower this a little bit, now I'm only better than stations 48% of the time, so about half the time. And I'm selling about half the time. Now my profit margin has decreased, right? So we'll put these back the way they were. I aim for that 50 or 60 to 20 ratio, right? And that gives me my profit margin. And so you adjust your turnover how you see fit. Now I've added another function to the sheet. First off, you put the amount of cargo space that you want to allocate to this project. In my case, I have most of the services, and I've saved myself some space for other stuff. But I go with about 15,000 units of cargo hold space. And I have a shipper's profit guarantee of 60,000. It's not really a guarantee because it doesn't always work out that way. But shipper's profit is a number you put in here that affects this calculation here, which tells you how much you should probably consider putting in as like a shipper's fee, right? And this is just a number that you put in, a static number that's not affected by the percentages, based on two things. If the base profit of the mineral makes enough profit for it to be good for shippers in the first place, and if the range between the profit and the maximum price is too small, right? It's pretty stupid and complicated at the same time. But the bottom line is it guarantees that there's like 60,000 room of play in your price to allow it to be lucrative for a shipper. And sometimes that hurts you, like with platinum, because I can't buy really good at platinum because I just wouldn't make any money. But sometimes it helps you too, right? It's also like with monazite. Monazite's so stable that there's really no reason for me to buy it. It sells high, which is great for miners, but for a business like this, all I'm making is 20,000, right? But what happens a lot is you have maybe a miner who's going out for muscovite, or I'm not sure if muscovite and monazite can be found on the same rings, but let's say monazite can be found in the same ring as muscovite. Well, in the old days before carriers, we would just dump all that monazite in favor of the muscovite because the muscovite was more profitable and we didn't feel like carrying it 13 jumps to a station. But now my carrier is stationed right next to a ring where they can just come and go as they please, dropping off minerals and going back out, which means it's not so bad for them to pick up all the other cores that they find in the process. So I want to buy some monazite, even if it's not super profitable to me, because it makes it more convenient for the miner, and I can still net a little bit of money for it. So, to ensure that that's lucrative to a trader who would offload this, my carrier or my sheet does some calculations based on the profitability, based on the maximum range of profitability, and determines that we should probably add about 37,000 as our shipping fee, right? And so as you can see, if I zero this out, it changes the shipping adjusted price for buying the material, and it changes the shipping adjusted price for selling the material. And if we put that back in, now you can see I'm selling it a little bit lower and I'm buying it a little bit lower. So in the end, the miner is paying for the shipping fee, right? But that partly works because sometimes I'm the shipper, right? So I should get paid for shipping the mineral for the miner. In effect, you're just a warehouse that ships minerals or sells minerals to be shipped. And so that's where your profit comes from, right? So we can look at the different materials and see some of them buy better or make more profit than others. I'd like to add a function that factors turnover in a little bit better, where I can use data from this sheet to determine what really buys and sells and how fast, and kind of manipulate the numbers to reflect that better. But as it is, it works out, and it chooses the amount of cargo you should buy based on your cargo hold size down here and how profitable the material is. And so as you can see, muscovite is hella profitable. And usually, you can see with these, I use 60-20, but I've been using 70 because muscovite just makes so much money that it feels greedy to like set that up to the 60 range. It starts making like 200,000 plus profit, which, you know, I want to make some money, but I don't want to, you know, I don't want to make that much money. All I'm doing is holding the material, right? But, you know, if you're reasonable, people will sell to your carrier, and then you can sell and make a profit. And they don't have to worry about all the extra stuff. And you know, with the carrier selling at that price, when a peak price shows up, they can take that and make some money back on the shipping. So it works for everybody. That's the point, right? Down here, we got some basic calculations. Like if you follow this exact setup, you would need 11.5 billion credits to invest to make 1.254 billion credits back. Now that is purely passive numbers. That is assuming that the miners fill you up completely and you don't mine at all. And that is assuming that traders take the stuff from your carrier and sell it. And by the way, the traders can make a lot more money than you expect them to if they happen to find a peak price day. You don't want to concern yourself with that too much, but when the opportunity arises, grab your material and sell it for the best price you can. But this is kind of a minimum ballpark for how much profit you're going to make for that investment. I usually always do substantially better than this. And now there's a train. So that is the model, right? That is how you determine your price. And so again, what you're doing here, right? If you put your prices in for the day, right? Or you import from mine, which is fine. And then you come over to this sheet and you adjust your prices to the percent that you want. Again, I use 60-20. The data is a little chunky, so you can't always get exactly the percent that you want. But if you're going for 60, what I do is when it comes to buying minerals, right, I always play in the carrier's favor, but as close to the 60 as possible. So if I hit 12 here, okay. I need 12 there, not. So I had 11 in, which is wrong. So if I hit 12 here, and then I go to 13, 61%, and it skips over 60, right? Now I could probably put 12.5, but then we're just making it a pain in the ass. So we just put 12. Ideally, I'd like to make these some sort of slider bar or plus or minus button or something, but sheet sucks, so. But that puts us at 59%, right? Which is as close to 60% as we're going to get with a whole number. Same thing for this. If I put 27, it becomes 20 or 61. So in that little bit of difference, I play towards the carrier's advantage, but sometimes you can get an exact number. If I go 22, 23, 21, so we're going to the lowest 60 that we can get, 21, right? And so you're just adjusting the price so that you're closer to the percentage that you want in your favor. And then you come down here and you do the same thing, but in the opposite direction, right? So raising the price in this case will lower this percentage. Right? Now that means that stations are better than me 19% of the time, right? Because my price is higher. And so if I go up to 100, right now we're in 1% of the time. So let's get that back to where it was. Right? And so again, I'm working in my carrier's favor, so I'm the highest 20% I can be. And so that's all you're doing there, is you're adjusting your prices based on the percentage you want in this slot. This is just a reference for like the percent of the time that the price is better than the average price, and on the flip side for that, right? So that's all that's there. It's just reference material. You can look more into it if you want, but you're mostly paying attention to getting the prices where you think they should be for your carrier based on the data available and based on the percentage of time you want to be better or worse. Then once that's all set up, this will look at today's price. This shouldn't be used strictly to tell you whether or not you should buy or sell, because sometimes there's going to be sampled prices that are already expended or whatever, but they were within the day. But this just kind of tells you, like, maybe you should look at Inara right now and see if it's worth selling your platinum, or if it's worth selling your, right? You can look at Inara multiple times a day, and there's more prices that could outshine these or do worse than these, right? But this is just kind of like a heads up, like, hey, maybe you should sell today, right? Like, but don't rely on it. Look at Inara, see what you can find. And then you got your cargo distribution and all that. And so all that's pretty explained, I think. This is just some extra data about, different scenarios. Like if I self-load, if I mine all the materials myself and sell them, I'm going to make that much profit, right? Which makes sense, because now I'm not paying for the material. I'm just buying it myself. It's the same thing, but if I unload it all myself, this is how much I can expect. And then this is doing the whole job myself, mining and selling it by myself. This is how much money I make. Full hold values, what this is like, let's say theoretically you only want to specialize in one mineral, so you turn the rest of them off, and you only go with muscovite. This is how much, profit you would make doing that. Clearly muscovite's the way to go, right? But as I was saying before, having that spread of minerals opens you up to being more convenient for the miner. So when they hit multiple cores in a spot where they're trying to get muscovite, now they can still sell you that, and you can make some money off of that stuff too. Which brings us to the log sheet. So the log sheet, while this sheet provides a model for how to base your prices, this sheet lets you track what you're actually doing on your carrier, okay? It's not very automated when it comes to Inara. Like, you have to enter the data yourself and kind of keep track of what's going on. But it takes all that information that you put in and lays it out in a way that helps your brain process how much money you actually have, how much you have invested, how much you can expect to get back, what you've already gotten back, and things like that. And so you come in here, you fill in, just this customization stuff that's not really important, but, it just looks cool. This, on this sheet, on this particular sheet, this is the only information you need to put in. And so the way I've kind of arranged things is any box you see that is a single cell that has a border like this is a place where you need to input something. Everything else is left open, and that means that it's being processed on its own. You don't touch these things. You can see up here, this is already referencing something, whereas here, I literally just put 15,000 in, right? And so that's more or less what this does here. But this allows me to tailor that feedback to the carrier from this end of the sheets, so that I don't have to rely on this, because this is showing you everything as though you're buying and selling everything, whereas this will reflect if you decide to turn, say, Alexandrite off and not deal with it, right? I don't remember what I was doing with Alexandrite. Am I buying, selling? Yeah, I'm still buying. Okay, so my rambling aside, just go in here and put in the amount of cargo that you want to use on here. I'm rambling a lot. Did I mention I'm not charismatic and good at making videos? I'm so sorry. I apologize. But hopefully this makes you enough money and it's worth it. So let's get back to it. So we got the overview here. The overview shows you a bunch of fancy information. It shows you your demand on the carrier. Shows you, and again, none of this is automated. This is all stuff that I've had to put in myself. But again, it's not about the automation. I wish I could automate it, but it's a lot harder than it sounds. And I don't understand anything about Elite's API and all that shit. But this is, it's a bit more hands-on, but it helps you keep a good track of things. Total invested is the amount that I've actually spent on materials at the moment. Remaining investment is what is waiting to be sold, or what's actually invested right now. So of that 15 million, I've already sold some of it, so I've gotten back on that investment. And so this is what's left that hasn't sold and hasn't turned over, right? This is the amount of supply that I have on my carrier, which is inaccurate right now because of game bugs. I've added a function because sometimes I like to go out and just mine stuff myself to pad my profits a little bit. And so this keeps track of how much material I've mined. And then this is my returns, right? And so this is selling at the prices that the sheet expects to sell at, how much money I look to get back from what's currently invested, right? So this is my remaining investment. My return is everything that I sell, right? And so this minus this is my expected profits. Remaining profits. So it's a little bit higher because some of that material is mined, and it calculates like what profit you're getting from mined materials too. But it's pretty close, right? You know, a little bit over that. And you can see right here, profit of what's already been sold, right? So this is everything that I've sold of these materials. This is the profit that I've made off of them. 1.4 billion. This is the profit of this is what came from profits from trading alone. This is what's come from profits of what I've mined. And then this is the remaining profit, what I expect to get once everything else sells. This is, I forget what this is. Overall profit and deficit. So this is, right, okay, so this is right now, right? Like this is what I'm out until everything sells, right? And so if everything on here were sold and everything, and you'll almost never see this number in the green unless you just like don't flip over stuff right away and you just wait for everything to buy and sell out. But like right now, for example, I'm still waiting to sell 1.017 billion credits worth of void opals, and so that money is not overall profit, right? I've made profit off of individual sold units, right, which is what this number is showing you, but I'm still waiting to sell a bunch, and so it's not totally profitable yet. And then you've got some basic information: average price per unit, or average profit per unit, profit per unit from trade, and profit per unit from mined. Down here is estimations, because some of this data doesn't come in until you start buying and selling. And so it makes estimations based off of what the model tells you. And you can compare this to see how you're doing versus what you expected to do. So let's get to some of the other functions here. The report is like the main sheet. This is just here for public reference to help you set up the sheet. Records. So every time I finish a cycle, let's look at Alexandrite, right? And so I started buying Alexandrite on this date. I started selling it on this date. Now, usually my turnover is a little bit faster, but we've had some bugs with the market and stuff that slowed things down. When I started this batch of doing this back in September again, or whatever 80 days ago was, I had a really rapid turnover and was doing really well. And so you can see here, like, no, what do we need to look at? We need to look at records. So in like one day in Void Opals, I made a profit of 180 million. I made in 4 days another 198 million. In 11 days, I made 197 on that, and so on and so forth, right? And all of this has kind of dropped off substantially in the last month. And that's partly because of the release of the new mining ship with its new mining function. And so that drew a lot of people away from core mining. And that's also partly to do with the fact that people have been having trouble selling minerals to carriers and getting inventory out of carriers. And so we saw a huge drop off this last month in people buying and selling cord minerals, which has since corrected. And in the last week, I've finally started rapidly buying and selling again. And so that's why there's such a delay here. So don't let that discourage you. When things are running smoothly, and in the past, we see good numbers. But back to the point here. So with records, this is stuff now. This is the exception to my little bordered sell thing, right? Like, there's only a few things here that are already calculated. Like, this is turnover days, which just takes the date and tells you how many days, and then it divides to figure out like profit per day and all that shit. This is just a log that you keep of your finished transaction. And what a finished transaction means is, on a certain day, I started buying based on the recommendations of the sheet. I set a price on my carrier. Now, it doesn't match perfectly the recommended buy price, but that's because the in-game price setting technique uses percentages, which don't perfectly match the way the sheet calculates it. But you just get it as close as possible. And then you put the price that you set in there, or the initial price that you set. And I realize it says that over here too, and this is different. And that's because sometimes you might adjust the price during a purchase cycle or a sale cycle. And so these are the actual current prices that I'm using on the carrier. And these are where I started at. And that just helps you determine like the difference between what you were expecting and what you ended up getting. Basically, you set up your date, your amount you're buying, and you turn the sheet to buying mode. And that will give you your estimations. That will give you your actuals, total invested, remaining investment, units in hold, potential trade returns, potential mining returns. See, I didn't mine any, so there's no potential mine returns. It does some fancy calculations to kind of figure out what amount of profit each unit gets from trade and what amount of profit each unit gets from mined materials, which sounds simple enough, but it was kind of a pain in the ass to figure out, but I did it. And then it tells you like your average actual price. So if you do have some of those varying prices, like we got 836 down here, 832 up here, it averages it out based on the units so that you know roughly what you're buying for and roughly what you're selling for. Because the whole point of this is to make sure, especially because the game doesn't keep very good track of individual transactions, it's to make sure you remember what you bought the material at early on and to make sure that you set a profitable price later. So as long as you pay attention to these sheets and keep good logs, you will always make a profit on what you're selling. Unless you get tired and just want to sell some shit because it's not selling, right? And then you take a loss. That's never really happened to me, except I wanted to liquidate my carrier assets for the sake of loading it up with tritium and taking an expedition with my squadron a couple of years back. But basically, the way this works is you can either go in game or go on Inara, and I do it about once a day, but sometimes if I'm on, I'll do it twice a day, right? I'll look and see if anything's sold within that day. You can't log individual transactions, but what you can do is look at your demand on Inara, or look at the demand on your carrier currently, and see if it's different from the demand that the sheet says. And whatever the demand that the sheet says, if it's higher, right, than what it says on Inara, that means you sold some, or you bought some. And so you can either come down here and put in the amount that you bought, or if you're stupid at math like I am, you can just do the calculation right in the cell, which is 321 minus whatever Inara says. So 321 minus 300, right? So I sold 21, right? So equals 321 minus whatever Inara says. That means I sold 21 units. I can just hit control semicolon to put in the date over here, and then put in the price that I'm currently buying at. And boom. Now my sheet says I have a demand of 300, and that should match what you see on Inara now. All right? And then that influences the rest of the data here. That's not a real transaction, so I'm going to delete that. But once you fill up your demand, or you decide that you have enough of the mineral that you want, which is why there's a separate box for selling here. Typically, if you fill up, this is going to be the same as your sold, right? But you put in your current sell price and the starting of the transaction, and that sets up your supply over here. So currently I have 1535 units, which might be inaccurate because cargo doesn't match what you actually bought now because Frontier is generating minerals and hasn't done anything to fix that yet. A couple of these I've been putting magic numbers in to correct. Again, I assure you that is not a problem with the sheet. I've done the hand calculations to verify that everything matches what it's supposed to. I have screenshotted my in-game demand and cargo to make sure that I've been putting in the values correctly. Everything by hand checks out on the sheet. It's just for some reason the game decides that you started your initial purchase order at a different amount than you actually did. And via that problem, it generates extra ores right now. This has only been going on for like the last week, and each one of these sheets down here, so Alexandrite, Benitoite, Granditerite, low temperature diamonds, all of these are independent sheets that don't share any crosstalk in their calculations, right? These are the inputs, and they output to the overview. So there's no sharing of potential like sheet errors that I could have put in that would replicate over to the others to feed bad information to the overview. Other than the values in the game not matching. So it's definitely a problem on Frontier's end. I've communicated with them about it. I don't think anybody's going to report it because it's hard to explain how this spreadsheet works and to explain that it's not user error, it's you. Without like giving them this basic full fucking tutorial on how everything works. And even then, like with some of the work that I put in here, it's not going to be easy to just sit down and explain that to them. Not a lot of players are doing this much effort to figure out their shit. I enjoy doing this, so it was easy enough for me. Most players would just be like, I just, write down the price and set it, whatever. That's cool. I get that. I'm a nerd. I enjoy this shit. So, but, they're going to be skeptical, and they should be, right? Because not every player puts this amount of effort and rigor into figuring out what they're doing. But you can put magic numbers in, and that fixes it for now until they fix their shit. Same thing with the sell. Once you start selling, you don't have to be in selling mode to put in transactions, because sometimes I'll still be buying, but I'll see there's a good deal to sell Alexandrite, so I'll take what's in the carrier, sell it. That's why we have transactions over here, even though I'm currently still buying for my 321 demand, right? And so once you do fill up on your demand and you want to go into full selling mode, you just, boom, switch it to selling and sell what you've got, put in the prices that you sell it at. And so these transactions, again, they're not actually like in-game transactions. Like that isn't necessarily one miner, though it probably is based on the cargo size. That isn't necessarily one miner. That could be 3 miners who did like 30 a piece, but I checked it once in the day, and so that gets logged as a purchase transaction at that price. And that fills in this information, which all feeds back to the overview, right? And that's where you get all this fancy information. Analysis specifically takes information from records when you finish these transactions, right? So let's say I finish buying, I have 0 demand, so I start to sell, and over the course of a few days, I finish selling out this demand. Now I take some of the information on this sheet and I plug it in over here. And all I really need is when the cycle started, when the purchases end, when the sales ended. That tells me how many days it took my turnover to occur. That's the amount that I invested in that particular cycle. That's the amount that returned in that particular cycle. And that's the amount that I profited in that particular cycle. All of that I can pull from the Alexandrite sheet. This tells me, I put in the profit per unit. All of this is pulled from that other sheet, right? From that Alexandrite sheet. And I just have to make sure this name matches for it to calculate right. So when I put in Alexandrite, and it'll automatically start to like fill in that, right? But if I put in the right thing, that will reference correctly to this sheet based on these. Excuse me. Damn. Like I said, no charisma. So that'll feed into this information on this sheet and tell you, based on your turnover, based on the profits made, what you make on average per day for each material, right? And that will tell you, you know, like if your carrier's upkeep is 35 million credits per week, and you're making 104 million credits per day, which isn't a lot, right? Like you could go in a day and bounty hunt and make 200 million, or you can trade and make 300 million or a billion even, right? Again, this isn't the elite get rich quick scheme. This is the I want to run a business on my carrier tycoon kind of thing, right? This is for you. Um, and so my measure for success here is, does my carrier make more money per day or more money per week than upkeep? And the answer is it makes more money in a day than 2 weeks of upkeep right now. This is not necessarily correct because again, we had that gap, but I did some back of the, you know, envelope calculations to figure out that right now I'm operating with all the problems at 77 million a day average. And I was only able to do that because I keep good track of it. The only difference with any of these sheets is here on Tritium. Tritium is a weird kind of market because it's not based on station prices, it's based on player prices, right? And players, I keep track of it here. I look at the best prices for a good demand of at least 1,000 in Tritium, and I put that into the database here. And so these numbers can get kind of wonky because the other day we had some fool out there buying, you know, plus 1,000 Tritium for $1 million. And these are also only carriers that are reporting with docking access only, too. That should be noted. But these are like the prices that players typically put in for their Tritium purchases on their carriers. And these are the lowest station prices for stations that have good demand per day. And so that doesn't quite work like every other material, because over here you can see what I'm trying to find out with Tritium is not the same thing I'm trying to find out here. And I realize I should probably move Tritium to its own thing, but this is just how it worked out, because this used to be osmium, and then osmium turned out to suck. So I just kind of filled it in here. All right, I'm not a strict professional. All right, I'm a little messy with this. So this just tells you, like, and that's only that high. That maximum profit is only that high because that one guy decided to buy at $1 million. But whatever. 49,000 is kind of what you can expect if you decide to buy Tritium at a station and sell it. Ideally, my logic is that a trader should, like if you're doing player trade instead of station trade, you should probably aim to guarantee 60,000 credits worth of profit to somebody, even if it's right in the same system. But that can vary a little bit based on profit per hour and things like that. The thing about Tritium trading is you're not going to have a super high profit per hour. I mean, you can, right? But a carrier is only going to be able to buy at most 25,000 units, which is, you know, amidst multiple people, it's not going to last very long. And so you might get a high burst of profit per hour, but you're not going to get a consistent profit per hour out of that. So I aim for 60,000 shippers profit, and 60,000, like your average price is 46,000. So I feel like you should be, you know, buying for at least that much there. Which is about most players tend to stick pretty close to that price. I think most players kind of understand that logic on their own. They look at what an average trade loop offers, and they say, yeah, if I want to entice people to my carrier to do shipping or to do trading, that I need to at least offer better or at what the trade market shows. And most players kind of reflect that, but sometimes you get the cheap bastards, you know, looking at you 85,000 and 77,000. You're not enticing anybody. I don't care how close your carrier is to the planet. Raise your prices. Don't be cheap, or load your own fucking carrier. Right? It's only 45,000 or 46 to 47,000 to load your fucking carrier. Go do it. But don't do this shit. This is weak. There's plenty of money to be made in the game right now to be this cheap. Now, you know, I don't want to criticize too much. You know, maybe you're broke or whatever. That's fine. I get it. We've all been there. Maybe you're an early player and you're still trying to build up the upkeep you need to keep your carrier afloat for a while. That's fine. I get it. But, you know, if you're looking to be fair, aim for like the 103,000. I've argued with people about this who don't fully get the math involved. they make the, well, my carrier's right next to the thing excuse. It's like, yeah, but so are some of the trade loops, and the credits per hour are way bigger than your measly 77,000, price here, especially when you consider that this is just a burst price, right? The carrier is going to fill up pretty quickly. Most of the time, players aren't looking for 25,000; they're looking for 1,000 units, which you can do with one load on a Panther now, right? Like, so think about that kind of thing when you're setting a price for something. Let's get back to what the point was here, but because tritium is a little bit different, and I've considered going into the tritium, fueling up carriers market, I started keeping track. It can be a pain in the ass to kind of separate what you're reserving for yourself in fuel versus what you're willing to sell, right? And so that's kind of what this is. You just put in here how much fuel you intend to keep on your carrier at any given time. Because I have 15,000 cargo units displaced for the mineral operation, I have to know how much tritium I want to fill up on at any given time in my extra space, so that I also have space for cargo. And so 2380 for me with 18,000 some cargo hold leaves me like 1,000 space for extra bits and bobs that I might buy or sell on my carrier. So that, set that number where you want it based on how much space you want left over in your carrier, and based on how much space you dedicate to your operation. So real quick, we're talking about carrier space, and I forgot to mention. So I did mention this briefly, but let's say that's what the purpose of this is on the model. Let's say you don't have 11 billion credits to dedicate to filling up this much amount of carrier space, and you don't know how much space you can allocate to your operation based on how little money you have. You can use this specific sheet here. Let's say you have 1 billion credits that you can dedicate to this right now. You put that in here, 1 billion, and this will tell you how much of what to buy and how much total cargo space you should reserve for that amount of money to make this much profit, right? And so that's how I initially started this. Was, I didn't have the amount of money I needed to fill this up, but I grew, I invested, I made money, I made profits, I took those profits and reinvested them, and grew to a point where now I don't have to use this. I can just fill out the cargo and make a bunch of money. The only limit here now is that I can't have a bigger cargo space. And unfortunately, and this is one of the reasons I'm sharing this more now, unfortunately, squadron carriers can't have a market. That's 65,000 tons of credit that I could have been investing and making huge amounts of money for my squadron, right? But, Frontier, for some reason, in their infinite wisdom, didn't give us proper markets on the squadron carriers. But because of squadron carriers too, now players might be a little bit more interested in using the cargo space on their carriers to do something like this, which is why I'm sharing this with you. So now you might be able to make a little bit of money on the side of your carrier instead of dedicating it to filling up on other stuff. So that's all this does. That's why this is a little bit different. You can just set an amount that you want to keep reserved for fuel, and this tells you how much fuel you have in that reserve, right? So if I dump 500 tons of fuel into my thing, I would reduce this by 500, right? In which you can see I've been doing that here. This is kind of a lazy way of doing it. But if you're good at math and you can do it right in your head, you can just put in the amount that you're going to have left after you dump that fuel. That way, if I buy 1,000 tons of tritium that is specifically for the sake of selling, I can separate that amount and see how much I'm capable of sellable units and hold, right? I can see how much of that I can sell and how much I should not touch for the sake of keeping fuel. And that just helps you divide that if you're doing a carrier, tritium trade or whatever. But more or less, all this is just log keeping for your carrier, right? You put in the information as it comes. It gives you some basic information here, right? And so if you're starting a new cycle on something, let's say you don't want to trade something. Okay, let's cover that real quick. If you don't want to trade something, or maybe you want to hold on to something, but you don't want to do anything right now. That's what you have holding and none for. If you're not going to deal with platinum because platinum sucks, you can just put none. And what that will do is when I do that, let's say, what am I doing right now? I'm buying. Yeah, I'm still buying, right? This recommended units, right, is different than the recommended units on here. And it's different because it reflects whether or not you're buying other materials. And so let's say I turned off Alexandrite. Well, now that leaves me with a chunk of cargo space. That leaves me with a chunk of cargo space to the tune of, you know, whatever my hold was using to reserve for that amount of space. And that takes away from the recommended units. So if I say none, now I've got all this space. It's negative right now because I currently have that much in the hold. But if I had none in the hold, it would recommend 0 units. And that, so let's put that back to buying. So right now, if I wanted to buy some more, it's telling me I should buy 132 more units to my demand than it currently is, right? Based on the profit, because the profit level has changed since I did the initial purchase. But let's look at Muscovite. It recommends 945 units. Well, if I turn Alexandrite off to none, now it's not recommending it, which changes how much it recommends for every other material, right? So it's always trying to keep your carrier filled to the amount you designate, which for me is 15,000 units. So you're always working your thing. So if you decide that you're not going to use a mineral before you set your buy orders based on what the sheet recommends, you need to tell the sheet what you intend to buy and what you intend to sell, right? And so if you don't intend to sell platinum, then you need to go to platinum and turn it off. If for some reason you have a bunch of platinum or you aren't sure what to do right now, or you want to hold on to it for some reason, you set it to hold and it will keep the factors valued in against your cargo, keep everything where it needs to be without like really recommending anything or off throwing everything else, right? Recently I added another feature to, and this is just a back end calculation page that you don't need to pay too much attention to, but what I've added here is sort of a flow that takes and adjusts the cargo. So there's a problem in game with transactions where you can only buy 2 million of a thing at a time, or 2 billion credits of a thing at a time. So that's the game limit right here, right? So the game limits you to buying 2 billion of a material at a time per transaction. Well, with the current profit recommendation on Muscovite, my sheet recommends that you buy 2.7 billion credits worth of that mineral. Well, I can't do that. And so I'm not going to be able to buy as much as the sheet recommends, which means I'm wasting space that would have been that 771 million tons worth of, or credits worth of Muscovite, and it's going to no use, and I'm losing money. So this just does a flow where it takes that extra cargo space and redistributes it based on profit to the other ones, right? Until you get to where every mineral is recommended to buy as much as possible without overflowing over that 2 billion credit mark, right? And so that also affects your cargo right here, right? So once you determine what you want to buy and what you don't want to buy, you set them to buying, you fill in the data, right? So if you're going to buy Alexandrite, you look at this, it says buy 132. Now this only says 132 because I'm already buying and I already have a bunch, but it's comparing that to the cargo hold, right? So that if I had none of this material, it's going to be a bigger number, right? And so my initial purchase, I've done double purchasing on these particular cycles because of how slow things were with the errors. But typically I like to finish out that would have been probably about 2,000 units total initially. But fill in your initial purchase amount, your initial price. This is the price from the carrier. This isn't the recommended price, right? But you're trying to match the recommended price to the carriers or to the reference as much as possible. Same thing with this when you're selling. This is what you're currently buying or selling for, right? So this is here for your reference so that if you change your price from the time that you started, you have this reference here so that you can put it down accurately down here. So enter that, switch it to buying, put in the start of your cycle, right? This is when you first start buying the material. This is when you first start selling the material, or when you do a complete sell-off, not when you sell like, but like, you know, like if you finish your demand, if you fill up and your demand is 0, and so you switch it to selling and you put it on your carrier so that you're selling, this is the date that you do that, right? And then you put in the amount that you're selling, you put in that, and this is just the initial reference. This is how it started, and then you log every transaction every day or as often as you want, and it keeps track of all that and feeds it all to your overview. And that's the whole point of this sheet, is just to keep track. So sometimes I need to know how much money, how much liquid money I have, right? Inara doesn't do a super good job about keeping track of your assets. Maybe you're thinking about buying a squadron carrier like I am. So I need, you know, initially this was for other things. Like I need to know how much money I have without, you know, being confused by the in-game money tracking, which is terrible. And so I know that I can look at this sheet and say that if I sold everything off right now, I have this much money, or I have this much money coming to me. I know how much I need to invest. I know how much I know how much money I actually have available if I were to liquidate my assets right now, right? That's kind of the point of this. And also it's because I'm a nerd and like keeping track of this shit. And this looks fancy, doesn't it? I tried to make it look as elite as possible. I'm not great at like aesthetics, but I do like to match the in-game vibe as much as possible with this. That's why it looks like this. You can change it however you want. But that's kind of the point of all this, right? I should add some stripes to make this stuff a little bit easier to line up to the sidebar here. It's a work in progress. I've been working on this for like 3 years. But the last feature here is the course plotter. And so what you do with this is you can use a tool like ED Tools, which I think is off now. Like you can't use it anymore, but it's being continued in other places. Basically, whatever you use to find locations to mine, right, within a certain area, maybe you do it on Inara by doing like a ring search or whatever, figure out where these hotspots are for these different materials, and try to find systems that have the most of these in one system as possible. And for each material, you put in the system and the body that they're found of, right? And so you can see Wolf 406 has a bunch. It has Void Opal, Serendibite, it has Tritium, it has low temperature diamonds and Granditerite, but they're not all at the same body. So you put the body number in, right? And then this is just some sort of back-end stuff that like helps it determine what systems have the most profit in them and what bodies. It calculates what thing has the most profitable, the most profit or potential profit to be made currently, and tells you, hey, park your carrier next to that right now. So when my Serendibite fills up, this number is going to go down, and now I know that I should probably jump to LHS 26615 to go make profit. Right now, the most profit to be made for me is Serendibite at Wolf 4061, and so the carrier, or this page particularly, tells me jump my carrier to Wolf 406 body 1, right? And that's the last feature that I added. It's kind of neat. It's not foolproof. Like sometimes it might be more beneficial to jump somewhere else, even though, you know, because Serendibite, you know, there's a lot of profit to be made there, but Serendibite kind of sucks. A miner might not necessarily want to mine Serendibite because maybe they don't make as much money as they would, say, for monazite, right? So it's not foolproof, but if you're looking for like a suggestion based on the profit you're making, that's, you know, that's kind of what this does. Last things last, setup. So say you want to use this. So I'm going to provide links to this in the section. And I know this is kind of long-winded for what it is. And again, I'm sorry, I'm not a video editor. I'll try to tag in like the key highlight points of where to look for all this shit. Maybe I'll make a separate video that is specifically dedicated to the setup process here. In my comments, or whatever it's called on YouTube, or the description or whatever, you're going to get 2 links. You're going to get a link to the public version of this sheet, and you're going to get a link to the public version. You're going to get a link to both public versions, right? The first thing you're going to do is you're going to come to the carrier mineral pricing model public, and you're going to go to. I might not have it on this one because this is mine and I don't really need it here. But you're going to go to. You're just going to go to it, and you're going to make sure it works, right? You're going to make sure it's the permissions on sheets is really hard to get to work the way you want to. But if it doesn't work, just let me know. You're going to copy this link from this sheet. Oh, that's what you got to do. So you're going to go to on this sheet, you're going to go to the price database. Okay. And this database starts right here in this A12 spot, right? So you can see it starts here. And you'll notice that on the sheet, it has this little thing over here that tries to explain in a nutshell what I'm explaining to you here. You're going to take this link, right? This is a link to this sheet, specifically the price database sheet, specifically to this cell, this A12 cell, okay? And it covers the whole range of the database all the way down for as long as I put prices in. And what that means is all you have to do is take this link and copy it and paste it right here in A12. And then once you put that in there, it might say like reference error or some shit like that or something. If you click on it, it might ask you to ask for permission to use the sheet, which if I've set it up correctly, which I don't know that I have, and I won't know until people start trying to do it, it will load this in for you. Now, I've gotten this to work for other people that I know, so I know it can be done. It's just offering it publicly where a lot of people are going to be using it. It might be a little bit different, so we'll see what happens. But that's the idea. Take this link, put it in here. If you don't want to use my samples, if you want to go and do the work of sampling the prices every day, put in the date, put in the amount for each material that is the peak price within the conditions that you set on your filters on Inara. Again, I don't always pick prices that are above a certain demand. Sometimes I just look at the highest price because the demand sometimes drives the price down anyway, and that kind of keeps it within a fair range. But just put these in, put these prices in. For tritium specifically, for none of these do I use player prices. I only use station prices, except tritium. Tritium is specifically geared towards the, tritium fueling market. So for this, I put player prices in off of carriers. But everything else is stations. This is the buy price from a station, right? So you set your Inara filter to buy. I used to use EDDB for all this stuff, but as we know, EDDB is no longer with us. So I use Inara's pricings, which it still works. We're still making good money doing this. I've been doing this for a few years now. So yeah, every day you sample your prices and then drag your date down, sample another price, drag your date down, sample another price. And your database will grow over time. I've been doing it straight pretty reliably for about 80 days. If you don't put a price in a day, or if I haven't put the price in a day, if you're using my database, you will get some errors on this sheet. It's fine. It just means I haven't put the price in. It's still going to calculate like your basic stuff. It's just not like you're going to get errors here for today's prices. You're going to get maybe some little errors, but everything else should still work based on the prices from the day before. This one will be completely fucked, which is why this one exists, where it uses the previous day's prices. So in case I miss a day, if I miss a day, it doesn't completely spoil the data. It just means I missed a day in the average calculations. I'm not perfect. I wish I could automate this. I wish I could just automatically have something go and pull the price into this so that I didn't have to do this every day. And again, I do get burned out and I don't spend all my time doing this. So don't completely rely on me, or if it stops producing, just assume that I've been burnt out or I'm working on other things and I'm not back. But I will be back at it eventually. The prices should be good. The only time you have to worry if there's a good collection of data here is if the game... Oh, my cigarette went out. If the game has some major market change. Okay, and we have had that happen, which is one of the reasons I started sampling again about 80 days ago. colonization severely affected the market. It changed the range on a lot of things. For a while, this is how, when I first started doing this is actually what the prices kind of looked like to begin with. But then they nerfed a lot of shit, and that was a major market change. And so Muscovite, for a while there, wasn't getting these big 1 million credit purchases. But then they released colonization, and I think they wanted to put a gold rush back in the game. We might be in a gold rush right now, so these prices might not hold up forever. But for the last 80 days, this is what they've consistently shown. If there's a major market change like that, then, even if I'm not consistent about putting prices in, that's when everything will change. And then I'll have to start sampling data again, or figure out a way to automatically snip out older data in favor of new data. That's not too hard to do, but generally I kind of play it by ear based on what's going on in game. Right now, this is how the prices are looking. And then I have an archive here from like my old collections of data. So you can see I have like 245 datas here from the last time I was doing this. I don't want to get rid of them in case they're, good to refer back to. But like Muscovite, you can see right here, right? Like, so Muscovite is G, right? Yeah, Muscovite's G. So price archive, you can see it is much rarer to see those million. And that's because they changed the market with colonization coming out. And now we're seeing these consistent, like, rapid fire fucking million plus transactions with Muscovite, which initially had me worried. I thought, did I just hit a lucky week here? But no, I've been seeing this pretty consistently. So, the gold age is the gold rush is back, especially for Muscovite, right? So that's the only time we have to worry about the data not being useful, right? But that's basically the idea. This has been going on for an hour and 11 minutes now. So I'm going to shut up and let you try to assimilate what I'm saying here. I'll try to mark the points where important information. Like I said, adjust your prices. This raises and lowers the price. You can go into it's a range between -100 and 100. And all of that should be explained in these little tags here. But that's how you get all this to work. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I do, for those of you returning after my last video like this, I posted this not expecting to get a lot of responses, mostly for squad mates and stuff that were using this. I didn't expect to get so many people interested in this, and I didn't see any of your comments until months and months later after I had burned out on doing it, which sucks for you guys. I'm sorry. I have a very old YouTube account where I used to do videos and stuff like that, where I used to have some quality of, almost quality of entertainment. And I haven't done it for many, many years. And that was back before YouTube changed, like, the way you name your accounts and stuff like that. And so it's kind of a grandfathered YouTube account that I use for my gaming stuff. And I usually watch everything on my other account, which goes by my actual name. And so I'm usually on that account and don't see a lot of activity from the other account because I don't get notifications for it, until I was like, you know what, I should check in on that. And then I saw like a bunch of people, like, I got a decent number of views and a bunch of people asking questions. And maybe it looks like I ignored them, and that wasn't my intent. So I'm sorry. Feel free to contact me on YouTube, leave comments, but you're more likely to get a response from me if you contact me in game by the same name, Novaceta, Commander Novaceta in game, or on Inara, or on Discord. Novaceta everywhere, basically. So, feel free to contact me that way. If you're having trouble setting this up, I can kind of walk you through it and answer any questions you got in a video chat or whatever, on Discord or something like that. But if this helps you make money, let me know. If somebody who has a little bit more skill when it comes to video editing and production and explanations wants to take this and make a more coherent tutorial out of it, feel free, let me know. I can answer any questions you might need to shorten that process. But that's more or less the short of it. Good luck, 07 Commanders. Sorry my video was boring.